Hello, I'm Haseeb Kamran, and today I'm going to present a journal paper which is titled A Roadmap to Achieve the Global Methane Pledge. And as you can see, this is a list of all the authors, and the journal name is Environmental Research Climate. So the course for this presentation is Energy and Environment, and the instructor is Dr. Amin Itminan. So this is the outline of the presentation. So first I'm going to talk about why the authors have selected this particular topic for their journal paper. And then I'm going to talk about the global context and significance of the journal paper, and then the novelty of the paper, that how it is unique, right? And then I'm going to discuss the data sources and the collection, and furthermore, I'll talk about the reliability and the validity of this data that is discussed in the research paper, and then I'll talk about the real world implications of the research paper, and at the end I'll talk about the conclusions. So the authors were motivated to explore Global Methane Pledge (GMP), which was originally launched in 2021, which is supported by 149 countries and the European Union. So the function of GMP is to cut down methane emissions by 30% by the end of 2030. So while most of the countries, like 86% of the countries, are committed to this pledge, but the GMP lacks to address like which country is doing what, like how are they actually decreasing the methane emissions. So the authors analyzed 476 actions in 168 different country plans, and they found out that if every country is doing everything, is doing like what GMP tells them, so they can potentially decrease the methane emissions by 31%. So the authors suggest that this is not actually enough, and we need to have some other backup plans, and we have to address some missed opportunities so that the methane reduction can be further increased. When we talk about the global context and significance of GMP, so GMP lacks the specifics on how the country and the methane emitting sectors will actually contribute to the 30% reduction of the methane emissions. So, and naturally determined contributions (NDCs), these are actually country plans, and the authors found out that 86% of the countries actually include methane emissions in their NDCs. But when they studied 476 methane focused mitigation actions within the 168 NDCs, so they found out that only 40% of the total global emissions were actually listed in the NDCs. So that brings us to the insufficiency of current NDCs. So they found out that even if the countries are doing everything in their power to reduce the methane emissions, so they can only reduce the emissions by 31%, right? And this is the ideal case. So, and the ideal case can never happen, right? So the GMP should actually be more focused on increasing the mitigations of the GMP actually. And so when we talk about the sectorial contributions, so the authors found out that 55% of the total methane emissions were coming from fossil fuels, and 27% from waste, and 16% from agriculture. So these are the sectors that need to be targeted first. And they also found out that the behavioral measures. So they said that if everyone can change their dietary shifts, and waste can be reduced, so this can actually reduce the methane emissions. And for global collaborations, so the authors found out that if GMP actually includes all the countries, not only GMP focused countries, they actually should include all the countries so that the whole world can take part in this GMP, and they can uh, they can contribute to this success. When we talk about the novelty and the distinctive features of the research paper, so first, the authors read the NDCs, which are actually what the country plans of 168 countries, right? So this is a lot, right? And I don't believe like any other research paper addresses this, right? So reading 168 NDCs, right, and they pinpointed like what are the actual mitigation action plans for methane, which are written for different countries. and they also highlighted like what are the different countries as well as what are the different sectors which are emitting the highest amount of methane, right? And they suggested like what can be done to actually increase the mitigation actions so that like the amount of methane in the atmosphere can be decreased over time. So this is really important and really helpful. The main aim of this research paper is to help the countries in reducing methane emissions, and the authors did that by thoroughly reading the NDCs and highlight all the problems and also like publish the results, which are discussed in the next slides. So first of all, some of the countries are red and some of the countries are blue in this diagram, right? So the blue countries are the ones that have joined the Global Methane Pledge, GMP, and the red countries are the ones that haven't joined the GMP, right? So, and uh, secondly, the countries that are highlighted, for example, in the first picture, USA is highlighted, right? So USA knows that livestock enteric fermentation is the main cause of its methane emissions, and it has written that in the NDC. So this diagram shows that if uh, every country like addresses the problems that are listed in the NDC, they can reduce the methane emissions, right? So this table shows the percentage of the methane reduction that can be achieved if a specific country, for example China, can reduce the methane emissions from its coal power plants, right? So if China addresses the methane emission from coal power plants, which are written in the NDC, so it can reduce the methane emissions by 5.61%, right? And same is the case for the other countries and the other sectors. So if every country were to address the issues that are written in the NDCs, so you can check that it makes up to be 31% almost. This diagram highlights the emission sectors, which has the highest contribution of methane emissions for that specific country, and for which the country doesn't have any mitigation plans in their NDC. So what I mean to say is, let's just focus on Canada, right? It's at the upper left corner. So we can see that enteric fermentation is the main source of methane emissions, which has the highest like methane emissions for Canada, and for which Canada does not have any plans in its NDC. When we talk about the reliability and the validity of the data, right, the authors have listed the website from which they have gathered all the data, and this is United Nations Climate Change. I have attached a screenshot of the website in which you can see that there is a list of all the countries that are part of the Global Methane Pledge, and from which the authors have actually studied all the NDCs, right? And they have checked like what are the mistakes and what can be actually done to like improve the mitigation actions, right? So this is all the data, right? So that validates that the data and the all the facts are actually real. When we talk about the real world applications of this research paper, so we can clearly see that the authors pointed out all the mistakes that were in the GMP because like they said that if every country is doing everything according to the GMP plan, they can only reduce the methane emissions by 31%, and this is the ideal case. So they suggested that we should consider the missed opportunities, right? For example, the behavioral things that we already discussed, and also include the non-GMP countries, so that we can actually mitigate methane emissions, right? And they also suggested other ways to to work around the methane emissions. For example, focus on the fossil fuels and the waste and agriculture sector first, because these are the highest contributors of methane emissions. To conclude, this research paper pointed out the mistakes in the GMP plan, and they also suggested that how can we actually address the problem and we can actually reduce the methane emissions. right? And by reducing the methane emissions, we can actually like slow down the global temperature increase, which is happening annually to 1.5 degrees Celsius, so which is pretty good. That is all from my side. Thank you very much.